Hey everybody, how you guys doing today? This is Jim Prusak, licensed physical therapist from the Pain PT. And today we've got evidence of the week. And I love bringing this to you because, again, as a licensed healthcare practitioner and someone who's done some research, I really value the evidence. We call this evidence-based practice. And the evidence can give us knowledge and information that's been studied and legitimacy to understanding these conditions so that you can take from the evidence and apply it to yourself in terms of your approach for dealing with these chronic somatic symptoms. So let's get to today's evidence of the week, everybody. I've got so many things I could bring to you, but today I'm going to bring you a paper from 2021, okay, in behavior research and therapy. And the title of it is an attentional perspective on fear conditioning and chronic pain, the informational value of safety cues. Now, many have heard me talk about the four categories. I like to break this down too. You can go refer to one of my other YouTube videos about beat, how we're going to beat the somatic symptoms. I really like that acronym because it not only sounds good, right? We're going to beat your somatic symptoms, but those four areas really conceptualize the areas that we could work on to shift, right? And they include B, it stands for your behaviors, E, your emotions, A, your attention, and T, your thinking. Thinking is your beliefs, your perception. But A, attention. So we're going to highlight that today, the attentional component in relation to the emotional component, which would be fear here. Okay, so we have all these four components of beat work together, your behavior as well as your thinking. So let's get to the information here today. We'll tie it all together so you can take an understanding of how you could apply this to your own recovery. So they start out talking about learning, right? Conditioning. It's called associative learning. I talk a lot about this with people working with how the brain gets conditioned. It learns. We have a brain similar to dogs called like Pavlov's dogs. You've heard those studies that were done with classical conditioning. Ring the bell, the dog salivates with the food. It's given a stimulus, it pairs the association. So it's called associative learning. Okay. And they say here associative learning has been acknowledged to play a central role in the acquisition and the preservation of chronic pain. Now, again, I always want to highlight the fact that if you don't have pain, it's any somatic symptom. They study chronic pain a lot because that's a very common chronic symptom, but you can substitute your neuroplastic symptom for chronic pain. It doesn't have to be just be pain. And they mention here that um, this associative learning, it says individuals with chronic pain or chronic symptoms might exhibit a specific learning bias that facilitates the acquisition and generalization of pain-related fear. So fear conditioning, right? So here's one of your emotions that we commonly see is the emotion of fear, which like I talk about on my channel, that many times it's just anxiety because the threat or danger isn't real. Okay, so we have to distinguish between fear and anxiety, but in terms of the energy in your body, the emotional energy, it's fear energy. All right. So we can learn, the brain can acquire fear conditioning, and then that can set up a process in your brain of this predictive coding and conditioning and reaction in the future. Okay, and in the laboratory, what they've been able to do in terms of how they study this is they can get participants repeatedly observe some initially neutral stimulus, like a picture, a tone, a movement, right? So you can think about this in your own life, like these are like the triggers that are normal things, let's say eating a food or moving or bending over or something with that gets paired or associated with your symptoms. So in the laboratory, they can pair these up. They can pair some very neutral thing, like they mentioned here, a picture, a tone, a movement, and they can associate it with the pain, meaning they give the patient a shock, shocks them, and right. So the brain learns to associate potential, just like Pavlov's dogs ringing the bell, learns to associate whatever the stimulus was, the neutral stimulus, with the pain, and the brain can then produce that in the future. Okay, and they say that constitutes a threat cue. Okay, so something that's neutral, right, can become threatening in our brains when the brain has learned to associate or pair it with threat or danger. All right, and especially in, they say, an absence of a safety cue. Okay, we already have evidence here. They say that there is an evidence for learning deficit in people with chronic pain, and they call it impaired safety learning. They put that in italics here. This hypothesis of impaired safety learning, and that exists in people with chronic pain. So in this study here, what they wanted to do was confirm the hypothesis of impaired safety learning in people who have chronic pain, chronic symptoms, and specifically examine the attentional correlate. So this is your attention now in relation to the fear conditioning. So attention, just like it sounds, one of your four categories, attention, A, that means how much attention you're giving to the threat cue, how much attention you're giving to the symptom, right? In a negative way or hypervigilant way or in a fearful way. So that's what they looked at in this study here. Again, let's go down to some of the results and see what they found in this particular study. And then we'll go through how you can translate this research into an understanding and practice for you. Okay, so again, they already said in previous research findings, so this isn't the first study, it reveals that people who are suffering from chronic pain, chronic symptoms exhibit impaired differential fear learning. Okay, remember the brain is biased towards threat and danger, which is fear. Okay, so what they found here is again, this hypothesis here about impaired safety learning. They found this to be true. They said here um, that was true that there was impaired safety learning in the people with chronic pain versus the control group. But what they also found that was new here, it says their results revealed evidence for an essential attentional contribution. So again, this is your attention to impaired safety learning and chronic pain. So now we're bringing in this component of attention that is an issue here too. Okay, so with the threat and danger, impaired safety learning, fear conditioning, attention is one component here that plays a part in this. And so the major focus of our experiment was to examine the allocation of avert attention when cues of threat and safety that were relevant for predicting shock. So again, they used the shock again as a way to elicit the pain and see what people did. And what they found here is that the results revealed that fixation probability, so again, your attention being fixated on the threat or the shock or the pain or what was going to happen, and the total dwell time, so as much time as they're dwelling on this with their attention, were actually more strongly modulated by this conditioning, okay, in the people with the chronic pain than the pain-free controls. So essentially what they found here, as I said, is that participants with the chronic pain allocated more attention to the threat cue than the irrelevant contextual cue. Okay, but they've specifically failed to do the same for the safety signal. So this is the takeaway, everybody. People who have had chronic pain, chronic symptoms, many of you yourselves, the brain has learned now, it's been conditioned to look for threat and danger over safety. It's not going to be looking for safety. It's going to automatically go towards threat and danger because of what you've been through. And that can continue the cycle of fear conditioning, learned fear conditioning, and symptoms. Okay. They did not see the same thing in the control group. The control group were able to look for safety. In fact, their brains were looking for safety, whereas the chronic pain group's brains were looking for threat and danger. Okay, so that becomes learned and associated, as you can imagine, because of prior experience with pain and doing certain things. So again, here what they said here is that again, like I said, in the attentional preferences in the control group was for the safety cue. Okay, so these findings suggest an essential attentional contribution to impaired safety learning, and to our knowledge has not been reported previously. So this is the first time this was reported in a study, 2021. So that's why that a category of attention, I teach that it's really important that we move our attention towards safety and away from threat and danger, right? So how can we do this? Well, we can move our attention away from our somatic symptom onto something else that's neutral or positive. They call this grounding sometimes or pendulation. You can feel your feet on the floor. You can look around the room. You can go to your hearing sense. You can put your attention back on life. That's a great one, right? Because you're fine. There's no threat or danger. like I always tell you guys, except for in your brain. When you have these chronic somatic symptoms, it's caused by your brain, not your body. And so the threat or danger exists in your brain, or it's triggered in your brain, and that kicks it off in your body, the symptom. But in reality, there is no true threat or danger. It's perceived. Okay. And you have to understand your brain is going to be wired up now to look for threat and danger. We need to teach it to look for safety instead. That's what the control group was doing. The chronic pain group was not doing that. And that was related to their attention. So, in the conclusion here, what they found here is that it says while the central role of classical conditioning, this is Pavlov's dogs and applies to us as humans as well, for the acquisition and preservation of chronic pain has been highlighted previously. So we got studies showing that. Learned attention so far has not been part of the picture. So this is, again, the first time they've proven that your attention plays a role as well. Okay. Our fear conditioning data from this study indicate that relative inattention to the safety signal was the most prominent characteristic in the participants with chronic pain. Let me read that again. So important for you to all to understand this. That the data from their study found that the relative inattention, so not paying attention to the safety signal, was the most prominent characteristic in participants with chronic pain, which basically means the brain is again is going towards the attention is going towards threat and danger. Okay, because of what you've been through. It could even be because you've had trauma earlier in life, or again, the brain's associated, learned, conditioned, all this stuff. So we have to move our attention towards safety. That's the takeaway here, and develop that safety cues, right? We talked about safety learning, um, messages of safety, right? Your attention now needs to move towards safety. So that one of your categories is your attention. You want to move it towards safety. Somatic tracking, pain reprocessing therapy is taught by Alan Gordon. It talks about viewing the sensations from a lens of safety, right? That's what he says, a lens of safety. So if we're going to do that as an attentional practice, that's what we're doing, or we're putting our attention elsewhere to teach and show the brain there isn't anything wrong. They call this learned inattention. So the brain has learned this, right, because of what you've been through. So we've got to unlearn it, and this is the work you've got to do. And here's the final takeaway is what they said, which is basically what I'm just telling you now. It says, with respect to therapeutic implications, this suggests that patients may specifically profit from attempts to improve inhibitory learning. This is safety learning during exposure treatments when related to anxiety. So again, as we're doing exposure, right? So this is your behavioral component now. We're bringing in, let's say you're going back to life or you're trying to challenge yourself to do more things. And, somatic symptoms are arising you because of the threat and danger reaction from your brain. That's when we're looking to teach safety. We do not want to go into teaching more threat and danger, right? Or fear conditioning. So they found here, they said, for example, fear conditioning studies have shown that increasing positive affect, remember, affect means emotion, increasing positive emotion during extinction. So when we do exposure, if we can become more positive, right? Hey, this is okay. It's safe. There's nothing wrong with me doing this. This is good. I'm exposing myself. This is normal. I want to do this. This is great, right? And we put our attention on something positive or neutral. What we're doing is we're creating positivity. We're creating a positive connection, positive conditioning now, correlation, association with what we're doing. That is really important. And that's what the research says here versus automatically getting pulled into that negative fear conditioning and threat and danger reactions. Okay, so again, positive affect allows some inhibitory learning, right? So downregulate the brain, downregulate the nervous system, and it can attenuate the fear reaction. Okay, so it says a boost in positive affect, right? Positive emotion, that's your emotional category. Positive thinking category. Positive way of attending, why you go about your behaviors may well relate to a stronger teaching signal to encode safety. Okay, so I hope you take a lot from today's evidence of the week, everybody. Your attention is one of your 4 components that I teach here. And we want our attention moving towards safety and away from the learned threat and danger conditioning that is acquired, okay, that it automatically goes towards now when you've had chronic pain or chronic symptoms. If you guys like the video, please give it a thumbs up. I want the word to spread wide and far. If you enjoy the channel, please subscribe. If you're looking for help, please reach out. This is what I do for a living. There's many options you can choose, working with a one-to-one, group sessions. As a licensed health professional, you may have coverage through your insurance, through telehealth. You can inquire with me about that. But I'm really wanting all of you to get back to life. You can overcome your condition when it's neuroplastic. Can work at it for a little bit, but you can get there, all of you. So don't give up. And I'll continue to send you guys information like this week to week. Take care now. Bye bye.